So we have a full week to work through this. Your answers should just be typed directly into this Word document, which is already posted, already available on Blackboard. Obviously, your books and all resources are available to you. And this is much more of a conceptual um, exercise than actually working with any numbers. This is just kind of the thought process of the class. Looking from an operations management standpoint, how do we approach improving a manufacturing process? And there's a couple different things we can look at, and we went through different sections of the book. So what I'm asking is the hardest part of this exam is you need to actually pull your book out. I will also allow you to cite lecture. I think it's easier to just flip through the text. If you want to cite the PowerPoints instead of lecture from the chapters and you want to pull from those slides, because a lot of this was summarized in slides as well. I don't have that written on the exam, but you can. If you want to reference my slides instead of a chapter and page number, it would be, chapter and slide number, and that'd be okay because everything I put up I took from the book, so either way is fine with me. But you're going to answer these questions and actually cite your work, so it's not like some, after you've had, you know 5 or 6 drinks of various kinds sitting out on the deck, what do I think about quality, and just like typing away. I want it to actually be legitimate, thoughtful answers based on what we covered this semester. So don't try to just BS your way through. You should be able to refer to things we talked about in class going all the way back to the beginning of the semester. So for each scenario, you should be thinking, what approach would you take and why? What data needs to be collected and how? And then what sort of testing or analysis would be performed? So we'll walk through, the first one's probably the easiest one to walk through. So we're gonna walk through this together. And feel free to take notes. Again, I'm recording, you can look at this later, but this is how I would do this test. So you are hired by a company that wants to increase their throughput. At the team meeting, you provide potential solutions approaching the problem from several different perspectives. For each potential approach below, include why the approach would be helpful, what data is required, how it would be collected, what data analysis should provide. So the first, increase quality measures, in process and out the door quality. So what are all the different ways we can increase quality? What factors go into quality? Well, we've got our raw materials, right? We've got the functionality of the equipment, right? We've got inspection that can help us pull out defects if they're not good. So if I wanted to increase my quality measures for my in process, I would look at every step of the process. I would see what their quality rating is per station. And those stations that have the lowest levels of quality, I would see how we could fix it. Whether it's training, automation, standardization, whatever that may be. So you can hear in this description, this is vague. You're not gonna have a the answer is blah, blah, blah. It's going to be conceptual, but it should be specific in how do we improve quality? Well, we improve quality by looking at the process, looking at the equipment, looking at the material, right? That's how we improve quality. It's going to be one of those things. So maybe your person isn't well trained. Maybe they don't do their job well. That's an easy thing. Retrain them or fire them and get someone else. Maybe your materials aren't really good, whether that's the raw material coming in or the quality of your tooling, and that causes issues. Okay, well, we can fix that. Well, maybe the equipment itself is, 60 years old and is like held together with duct tape and spit, and you can't really get it to run right. And so the equipment itself causes defects in the process. Okay, well, let's look at the equipment, right? So those are the things that you would know impact quality. So you can't give an exact answer, but you can definitely say where you'd want to start. Does that make sense? Because if this is too off the wall for you guys and like not connecting, I want to know. I want that feedback. But when I sat down to write the final for this course, I had a choice. I could either go back and like pull out all of those equations and just give you a whole bunch of math problems, but I don't really think that that's what this course was about. In my perspective, that's not what this course is about. This course is operations management. How do you actually run a manufacturing floor? What do you pay attention to? And when you graduate and go and get a job and all of a sudden you're in charge, what are the things that you need to pay attention to? That's what this exam is about. But it's going to take a little thought on how you want to phrase everything and frame everything. Okay, so part B, increase production capacity through scheduling. So this is the last chapter we did, right? So if we're going to talk about scheduling, we're going to be looking at chapter 25 because that's where we talked about scheduling. How do we increase capacity through scheduling? Well, I can add more shifts, right? I can add overtime. In the short term, I could hire another company to do extra work for us, farm it out. I could hire temp employees to work off shifts, right? So my production capacity through scheduling is saying all the equipment's going to run exactly the way it's been running, but instead of it running 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, I want it running 24/7, 365. How do you do that? Well, at the end of the day, to increase production scheduling through, to increase production capacity through scheduling means people. And so I've got the people I already have, and then there's more people I can get. Or I can use someone else's production capacity who could make the same product and pay them to make the product for me and then resell it at a higher price so I'm still making a profit. But that's production capacity. Capacity, your limiting factors are your people and your equipment. So when I talk about scheduling, I'm looking at capacity for production through people. So then part C, increasing production capacity through automation. Now I'm looking at equipment. If I'm doing a process manually or semi-automated, the human aspect is my limiting factor. That's my bottleneck, right? But what if I automate? Now all of a sudden, instead of filling 20 bottles an hour, I can fill 200 bottles an hour because I have a robot doing it and it's speeding through on a conveyor. Obviously, that has a lot of cost associated with it, but I could do it. And then finally, increase current line efficiency. So that goes back to chapter like 16 or 17, where we are talking about that ratio of efficiency is product uptime to product downtime. And in the book, we had, lists. What are all the things that can impact downtime? Why do you have downtime? So if I want to increase line efficiency, my answer is decrease downtime. Well, what specific downtime do I need? Well, there's a whole list in the book that you can cite to say, here's all the potential things that can cause downtime. If I get rid of those, then I've increased my line efficiency, which means I can increase my throughput. That's question 1. That's how I would answer it. Does that make sense? I only have Trent on video, so everybody else has to give me like a thumbs up or actually talk.
Yeah, show your faces.
Yeah, or you could just put your videos on, yeah, and then I could see you. There we go. Hey, Justin. So is that making sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
Okay, thanks, Jared.
No problem.
All right, so number 2, a company wants your assistance in converting their manual assembly line to a partially automated cellular manufacturing layout. 2-part question. What considerations should be made in looking how to determine which processes can be automated? This is chapter 16. This is where you would list all the pros for automation, and it has all the cons for automation, and it tells you what sort of situation you should have to facilitate that automation taking place, right? So that's the list you're looking at to say, how do I know which processes should be automated? Well, here's the requirements for automation. Anything that meets those requirements would be a good candidate. And then the same thing for cellular layout. That was chapter 17. What considerations should be made when making a cellular layout? We had a whole list in the textbook. When should you have a cellular layout? What do you think about? Chapter 17, just put those things there, reference chapter 17 or lecture 17, slide, whatever, reference that list, put a few of them there. And you don't need to be like rewriting the book. What I'd like to see is for you to actually write, like when you say cellular layout, you want a product that doesn't have really expensive equipment, that you can physically make the adjustment, that you could use people for more than one process, right? That came from a list. So maybe the list has 8 things on it in the textbook. I would refer to the textbook and then I'd list like 3 of them. I don't need to recopy all 8. It's just showing me that you thought about it, you went to find where the information was, you're writing a few things down to say like, this is what I'm talking about, and then you just cite the place in the book that has the rest of it. Does that make sense? So I don't want you rewriting like huge lists or recopying tables. You should be able to answer the questions briefly, but then cite where you got it from and say, you know, the rest of the list can be found on this slide or on this page. And that just shows me, because all I'm looking for is that you understand the concept and where we talked about the concept. So if you can choose the right, you know, line of thinking and give me a few examples of that, and then just cite the textbook to say, yeah, there's like 8 other things you could consider. This is where you find that list. That's enough. So for any of my OCD people out there, like, you don't need to recopy the entire thing. Does that make sense? Yes, thumbs up, good. All right. Question 3. A company is trying to identify how to increase in-process quality and does not know how to start. Create a plan for investigating the quality issues and potentials for addressing areas of lower quality metrics. Make sure you address sections A through C of the directions. Well, that's the stuff way up here at the beginning. What approach you would take and why, what data you would be collecting, and what tests you would perform. So there's a couple different places in our book where we talk about this, but for the most part, when we looked at all of the inspection and when we looked at those production levels, the way we did that was we said, you know, you had to have this Q, right? You had to know, well, what % of defects are there? Well, to do that, I need to be able to calculate Q, right? So if I was starting this from scratch, I would get all the data associated with each part of the process and find out how many defects they have and what their defect rate is. So that's step 1, find out their defect rate. Then step 2 is, once you find the ones, what their defect rate is, you know, think about how you can improve quality in a process. And we kind of talked through that for question 1, part A. So it's going to be kind of the same thing, but that's the way that you would go. And so you're going to put that together like in a little step-by-step plan. Question 4. A company is struggling with downtime due to lack of raw materials. What processes can help to align materials with this production and staffing, and what information would be needed to support these processes? So this is all chapter 24 or 25, where our section on ERP and MRP and production planning, all of that is from chapters like 24 and 25, and it talks about how you create a production schedule, and it tells you what data goes into creating a production schedule. Because if I'm having a hard time due to lack of materials, I'm either having an issue with raw materials being delivered on time, or I'm not paying attention to my inventory levels when I make my production schedule. It's one or the other, right? So there's two processes that I can look at. I can either look at the actual scheduling process, or I can look at my inventory process. Those are the two processes I'm going to look at. And so those are in chapters 24 and 25. And all the information that goes into those processes are in those chapters, and you would just put that together. Does that make sense? All right. So the last one is kind of talking about this you can write without really citing anything, but this is just kind of a throwback to our rolled throughput yield exercise, which was when we were dropping the cards on a piece of paper, and we realized that like some of those groups had like 26% quality or 18% quality. Like the whole point of rolled throughput quality was to look at the impact that when you have multiple steps in a process, even if you have a process that's at like 95% quality, if your other process is at like 75% quality, your roll throughput yield is, you know, in the 30s and 40s, right? That's what we found, that every process has to have a high quality level, because otherwise, as you multiply those out, you have lower and lower quality yields. And we saw that also in the inspection chapters, the chapters that we did. I think that was chapter 18 or 19. That was inspection of materials. And you saw that for each inspection station, you had to multiply out their quality reject rate against each other. So the more processes you have, the lower your roll throughput yield is, right? So if you have one process and you've got 90% quality, then your entire process is 90%. If you got two processes and each are 90% quality, then it's 0.9 times 0.9, which is actually 0.81, right? So it's lower. Even though they both have 90% quality, the fact that you have two processes in line with each other, the cumulative quality level is lower than each of them individually. So because of that, what steps do you take to address this situation? How do you increase rolled throughput yield? Well, you have to increase the quality level at each individual station, right? The only way to increase even though your out the door quality is high, the only way to increase rolled throughput yield is to increase the yield at each individual station, starting with the one with the worst quality, working until you have the highest levels of quality possible at each of the steps of the process. Does that make sense? That's what the
Yeah.
answer should be. So that's it. That's the exam. And you have until May 6th at 11:59 p.m. And if you have questions when you start working on it, just send me a text, send me an email. We can always do a Zoom session together and talk it through. I've had other students in other classes, they just like send me a text and we call or FaceTime, and I can answer whatever questions you need. I'm here, I'm available. So don't just sit and struggle with it if it's not making sense, but this should be really straightforward. Um, you know, this is just the thought process of operations management and process improvement. Does that make sense? All
Yeah.
right. Well, I'm going to post the recording so you can reference this later. And as always, you know, please feel free to ask me any questions. And then after the semester is over, we should, and like the world opens up again, we should like go grab a beer somewhere and hang out, because I lost like most of a semester with you guys. And so we should have some sort of reunion once we're allowed to like go places again.
Down the corner bar.
Slim Jim's a corner bar.
There we go,
Hell
corner
yeah.
bar. Sometime in June when the world is reopened, we'll be
Yeah.
there. All right. Well, you guys stay safe, stay healthy. Ask me if you have any questions, and I will talk to you later, okay?